Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, the impact of war on the soils of Ukraine.
We found hotspots, particularly where military vehicles are involved, and we found elevated levels of heavy metal in these areas.
More on that new research later. First, farmers in South Wales are warning that sheep will starve if urgent steps aren't taken to create access for suppliers cut off following a significant landslip. It's closed the main road to the village of Llanthony since the end of January. The only alternative route is the highest mountain road in Wales, which is single track and unsuitable for many vehicles. BBC Wales's Lucy Vladev has more.
It's been more than a month since the landslip closed the main route in and out of Llanthony village. It's created a vertical drop next to the road, with the damage and the risk of further soil erosion underneath, creating extremely unsafe conditions, according to the council. In this rural landscape tucked between two valleys in the south of Wales, it means around 150 locals have been cut off from the usual supply route they rely on.
I've got 850 sheep here, so behind me there's 200, but I have more out in the field, and I don't have enough hay for them to last until when they'll be lambing. The alternative diversion just is not suitable. Those vehicles can't physically drive that way.
For farmer Bryony Gittins, as well as the issues it causes her young family, the lack of access for heavy agricultural lorries carrying things like silage and concentrated feed is really worrying.
The implications are huge, not just economically for the farm business itself, but also in the welfare for the sheep themselves. They're hungry, and they'll get hungrier and hungrier, and I don't have anything to feed them.
The only alternative way in and out of the village, whether you're a resident or an emergency service, passes over the highest mountain road in Wales at Gospel Pass. Mostly single track, filled with potholes and subject to very changeable weather. The day we drove it, ice and snow were still causing hazardous conditions following a cold few days. Local resident Mark Morgan says anxiety in the community is now growing.
Nobody local would ever consider that as an alternative. My father, who's just coming up to 90, he lives a couple of miles down the road from here. Normally, if he needs me for anything, it's a 10-minute trip to come and see him. But now I'm looking at 2 hours to get there and 2 hours to come home again afterwards. So it's 4 hours out of my working day, just if Dad needs me or he wants me to take him into the doctors or something like that.
With no timescale on repairs, locals are calling for a temporary track to be created in the field beside the landslip, which they say could take just a number of days. But there's also now a creeping feeling that, with more frequent storms and the disproportionate impact it can have in these areas, there's an urgent need for authorities to look at longer-term solutions.
It's no fault of our own, so it hurts even more when we're having to turn down trade. Because we can't run our business as usual.
Chris Powell is a local agricultural contractor.
Without preventative measures of maintaining riverbanks and cutting down trees that's causing the soil to go next to the road, it's just going to keep happening.
Monmouthshire County Council has set up a dedicated page on their website for updates, in a statement saying the road remains extremely unsafe and that it's working with relevant departments to coordinate appropriate measures for essential services, including emergency access and school transport, while they find a safe, engineered solution. For the community here, though, feeling safe relies on how quickly that solution can be found.
Lucy Vladev reporting there. Now, all this week, we are going to look at food processing. It has been much in the news with the concerns over ultra-processed foods. But actually, it covers everything from making cheese or chopping carrots into battens to ready meals. And it is a big business. Food and drink is Britain's biggest manufacturing sector, with an annual turnover of about £148 billion. That's according to the Food and Drink Federation, which represents these businesses, and warns that at the moment weak consumer demand and cost pressures make this a difficult sector to be in. Kate Halliwell is Chief Scientific Officer at the FDF.
Processing is a very broad term. So in the food sense, it could be chopping a vegetable, but it could also be turning that vegetable into soup, turning it into a pasta sauce, breads, breakfast cereal. So it's a whole range of products. And really what we're saying is if you take a raw ingredient and you do pretty much anything to it, you have processed that.
We do see frustration sometimes from those who grow the raw ingredients that food companies use about the share of the price that they get. Is that fair?
Food manufacturers generally are operating on pretty low margins, I would say, and it is important to us that we have thriving farming businesses. We are farmers' biggest consumers. We buy from them most of their products, so I would say we would look to support where we can, and a really great example of that actually at the moment is thinking about some of the things like regenerative agriculture, looking at how we can share both the risk and good practice as companies are looking to have ingredients which are more sustainably sourced. So somebody like Suntory, so they make Ribena, they have partnered with University of East Anglia and they've turned their blackcurrant farms that are based down in Norfolk, so they have 60 hectares there, and they've turned them into regenerative pilots so that they can learn about how you can improve the sustainability of production and share that through with farmers.
We hear a lot from farmers on this programme saying things are tough. What are things like for food companies?
I would also say things are tough for food companies. Obviously, we have had a succession of challenging times over the last probably 6 years. So the global economics, the global situation is really difficult for food companies. It impacts things, supply chains, of course, but also things like energy. Roughly 50% of costs in food manufacturing goes to energy. We are quite energy intensive. And unlike other advanced manufacturing sectors, government doesn't give us any relief on energy. That is something we would like them to consider. And as I said, we are a low margin industry. And so what that has meant as we've had food price inflation over the last few years, everyone who shops is aware of that. But that has come through supply chains and companies have absorbed some of that cost, but there's a limit to how much you can actually absorb. So I think everyone is looking at effectively how we can stay afloat. And unfortunately, certainly in our sector, we are seeing more insolvencies than you would see on average in British businesses.
Kate Halliwell from the Food and Drink Federation. When we talk about war, we obviously centre on the lives lost and the impact on families affected. But as new research in Ukraine reveals, there's also a cost to the soil. And in a country once called the breadbasket of Europe, that could have long-term repercussions. Researchers from the UK's Royal Agricultural University and Sumy University in eastern Ukraine have spent the past 4 years testing farmland soils across the country. They estimate that between 20 and 30% of land has been affected by the war. Well, last week they came together in Cirencester to share their findings, and our reporter Rebecca Rooney spoke to Professor Mark Horton in the labs at the RAU.
So this is our workhorse analytical machine. So we've sent out several of these to Ukraine and set up laboratories. So here we've got soil samples here, and we put it into a little box here. So the soil has to be milled and dried, and we pop it in there like that. We press the button, and what it produces you is readouts of all the metals that are there.
What have you found?
Well, what we found is good news and bad news. We found hotspots, particularly where military vehicles are involved, and we found elevated levels of heavy metal in these areas. However, we think the bomb craters have had less of an impact. We suspect it's quite spread out because when a bomb lands, it vaporizes, and so the heavy metals can get spread over quite a wide area, but in relatively low concentration. So we suspect that something like 20% of the landscape will be affected and will need cleaning up in some way or the other. And of course, the other big question that's really not known about is how much these toxic heavy metals, like lead, for example, we're finding high concentrations of lead, might well affect both the growth of those crops, but also how much that lead might be taken up as a toxic element into the plant and food, ultimately.
Is their food safe?
Yes, one of the conclusions from our project is that Ukrainian food is perfectly safe. But with that, before giving it a complete clean bill of health, ultimately, I think these hotspots need to be identified and some form of remediation applied there.
And when you talk about remediation, what's involved and how long does it take?
Well, that's a very big question. I mean, obviously, one would want to, as it were, clear away any of the military debris and so forth. But also, it might well be that one might plant in these hotspot areas plants that are not food crops, but could be used for other purposes. And they would take up the heavy metals, and then they don't go into the food supply, but you could be used, for example, for building, for energy, and so forth.
Новий мікроскоп, він був залезений буквально місяць тому.
You're Dr. Elena.
So I'm project manager. We are testing soil in different areas, especially in areas closely connected to frontline. Our farmers are so resilient, and as soon as the territory is liberated, they're coming back to grow.
You talked about the resilience of Ukrainian farmers, but it must be so hard because it's 4 years now.
Yeah, it's a very difficult topic because there are a lot of scientists, researchers, educators, they have farmers for sure, they had to leave their main job to serve for army. And even in our team, we have a team member who is a doctor of soil science, but now he's defending country. And now he can see it not just from their lab, how to help farmers, but he sees it from the front line.
I'm Oksana Datsko. I'm a senior lecturer at Sumy National Agrarian University. We are just living and trying to do our work and trying to do something for Ukrainian soils, for Ukrainian production, our people and global food security too, in normal somehow.
That report from Rebecca Rooney. And that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and this was a BBC Audio Bristol production.